Welcome to Defy Limits, the podcast by Alanna Levenson. This is the show for bold leaders and visionaries who refuse to play small. Every week, we dive into raw, unfiltered conversations with risk takers who broke the rules, trusted their instincts, and pushed far beyond what they thought was possible. No fluff, just grit, action, and breakthrough stories you won't hear anywhere else. Today, we're thrilled to sit down with an extraordinary human being, Robert Hedequist. Join us for the next 30 minutes of real talk about life, leadership, and the mindset it takes to defy limits.
Welcome, everyone, and welcome to my guest, Rob Hedequist. Rob has spent his life defying limits, and boy, has he, and doing it with a heart, which is close to my heart. He's a former Marine recon officer, Division I athlete, and executive who's led in high-pressure environments from the front lines to the boardroom. It's his personal journey that really defines him. He's a breast cancer survivor and a devoted dad to a neurodiverse son, two roles that have stretched him in ways no title or rank ever could. Through it all, Rob has found strength in the struggle, perspective in the chaos, and even a little humor in the hard stuff. He brings a raw, grounded take on resilience, fatherhood, and what it really means to rise when life doesn't go according to plan. So, Rob, thank you for being here.
You know, it's not uncommon for us to be in situations where somebody tries to define us or put us in a box. It just happened to me the other day. I was defined as an elder statesman, and while there's great connotations associated with it, I don't see myself that way. I'm a classic, I'm original, I'm a warrior, D1 athlete, infantryman, force recon Marine, cancer survivor. That's right. So here's the message. Don't let anybody define you. Define yourself, and as a result, define your actions and the direction you want to go in life. Have a great day.
Alanna, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be able to interact with you on your podcast here. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where I'd love to start in learning a little bit about you ahead of time is about your son and how he has taught you about unconditional love. And what was that moment when you realized, like, now I have a real understanding of what that means?
That's a really great question, Alanna. And I think that, if I go all the way back to, my son's initial diagnosis and being a father, and I have three daughters as well. And so, and they're all older than he is. And I was blessed with my son coming into my life. Obviously, as a father, you believe that you have this, this unconditional depth of love for your children, and that has certainly always been the case. I think what happened for me is that when his diagnosis came back as being autistic, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it rocked my world, and I think any parent that says it doesn't rock your world is anyways, it rocked my world. So we'll just leave it at that. And at that point in time, he was 4 years old, and I was in a different place in my life and didn't have kind of the experience and understanding that I've gotten over time and through interacting with different individuals. And so for me, it was about learning to really embrace his autism, number one. And number two is that the deeper that I embraced it, the deeper the unconditional love came as it related to my son. And, as I watched him and as I interacted with him, I became acutely aware of the fact that there were really no boundaries in his love for me. And as I began to see that, it allowed me to begin to shift and love him with even greater depth, and love my other children with greater depth. And I think love people around me with even greater depth.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's it gives a whole different meaning to love bombing in a different light, as is often called. But I can imagine that being around, embraced by, and shown or demonstrated that kind of unconditional love. I would imagine over time you get to a point where you're like, how can I not reciprocate that or know what that means for me or looks like for me to be able to give that back?
Yeah, I think in all the situations that we encounter in life, we're always given a choice, and the choice is, how do I want to move into this to a greater degree, or perhaps not move into something to a greater degree. And for me, with my son, I felt like the choice was easy to make. It's I've got to move into greater depths, and being blessed and being given the gift of having an autistic son has expanded my horizons to much greater degrees. And I've got these other three beautiful daughters as well, and to see their interaction with him and see their love for him, has taught me a great deal. And so I always like to say I showed up thinking I knew a lot about a lot of things, and come to find out I didn't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm the middle of three women, so
Fantastic.
we're not blessed with an autistic brother, but
Exactly.
yeah, I
Yeah.
have two sisters, so
Yeah.
yeah,
So
beautiful.
they've been amazing with him throughout the years, and yeah, quite remarkable. Because they could have made a choice to not be as involved, and they could have made
Yeah,
a choice to not be as connected to him as they are, and as loving and as accepting, and as inclusive as they've been. And all three of them embraced it. And yeah, it's been quite the journey. One to really, I feel very blessed to be part of.
it makes me think about a couple things. One is exactly what you just said about when that's in a family unit, and how siblings or other family members either embrace it or remove themselves from it, like distance themselves from it.
Correct.
It also makes me think about a client that I currently have that when she came to me, she was trying to understand why she was feeling stuck in her sales conversations. And it was because she was approaching it more about wanting to appear smart and, know about what she knows and her brilliance. But she's realized in us working together, and it was such a subtle shift, is to be more heart-centered and show that you care about what they're going through, because otherwise they might feel ashamed. That was kind of a big aha for her. So anybody listening to this, whether, because this can relate to so many different contexts or scenarios, but when we move from our head to our heart, and we think and engage more from there versus from here, it's amazing what changes.
Alana, that's such a valid point. When we look at and we think about the body as like a system, right?
Yes.
And so we're both, in kind of the coaching space, but when we look at the body as a system, and you start to look at how that system functions and how everything is actually interrelated and intertwined. It's amazing when one part gets out of center, gets out of alignment, it affects all the other parts of our lives. And so that's such a great example of how, when we move from the head to the heart and we actually move towards that alignment, those emotional pieces that are so important, one of the big pillars for us, it really shows up, and we can show up totally different.
Completely. Yeah. It's when I led workshops at my last job, and we would talk about team values, and trust would come up a lot, but there's so many different ways to interpret that. But care, like the word care or caring, started to come up, and I was pleasantly surprised by that when it did show up.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, I think caring, and how that manifests not only in individuals but inside of organizations is just so important, because it does give that humanistic piece to not only all of us as individuals, but also to organizations. And what does that look like, and how does that value pull through to the team members within inside of a team, and what does that mean for the organization as a whole?
Here's my reflection for today. Like many of you, I spent years building an armor of masks, thinking they protected me, kept me strong, or helped me win. Masks that said, I'm bulletproof, I have it all together. But those masks got heavy after a while. They started to limit me, draining my energy, reducing my clarity, and blocking the genuine power I knew was inside. Here's what I discovered. Real strength comes from authenticity, not armor. Showing up fully human, honest, real, and powerful, it's where true excellence actually thrives. If you're feeling the weight of your own masks, it might be the time to trust the power of your authentic self. Your greatest breakthrough is waiting there. I know it was for me.
You had mentioned a little bit earlier about that diagnosis, that moment when you found out when he was young that he had autism.
Right.
What were in that journey, and you reflect back, like what were some of the early lessons? Because there's, there's what you reflect back on, and where you're at right now with it. You see the beauty of the caring of his siblings and so forth. But what were some of the early on lessons from that?
When he's 32 now, and so his diagnosis came when he was 4. So that was a number of years ago, and we know a lot more about autism and how it shows up in long-term effects now than perhaps we knew back then. And so one of the big learnings was, okay, how do we continue to find relevant treatments, relevant therapies for him that are going to allow him to advance in life, to interact in life, to become part of kind of everyday living as we see it. How does that integration happen, especially with sometimes in autism, obviously isolation and not socially participating is one of the key traits. And so trying to figure out, okay, how do we get him integrated in, and how does that move forward? And I think that integration process came not only through like Western medicine, but also thoughts on other alternative therapies that were going to be of benefit to him.
That I love that. So what suggestion or tip, because that is applicable to anybody, let alone people who might have autism or ADHD or, so what is something that you've learned that has been really helpful in being able to connect and communicate with him that could be applicable to any relationship?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've learned is that his means and methods of communicating are not the same as mine. And it's my responsibility to stretch towards him. Communication is really about being able to stretch towards other people's communication styles. And so we've got to get out of our own comfort zone and stretch into other people's communication styles in order to be effective and to have great conversations and to be able to connect at a level that's meaningful to us.
Yeah. And something else that comes to mind about that is I would imagine that there's been times where you were maybe a little frustrated with either trying to connect with him or trying to communicate something or to understand him. So what have you learned about that too?
What I've learned is what I've tried to put into place around communication with him is really being able to put the pause in place. Like, I don't necessarily need to give like an immediate answer. Sometimes it's more important to take a step back, put a pause in place, let my own system re-regulate and adjust and realign in order to be able to communicate with him at the level that's really important.
I love that. That's so, that's a really big part of heart math techniques or being heart-centered is that, and you use the term regulate. So self-regulation is such a powerful tool that we can use and by regulating ourselves or getting coherent with ourselves will inevitably impact the communication or interaction that you're having with somebody else. And when you're more coherent or have that ability to self-regulate, it will support the other person too. Yeah.
So that regulation is such an interesting piece, Alanna, because normally we'll feel it somewhere in our body. It's going to show up as a feeling. Maybe it's that, my experience, maybe it's a pit, it's a pit in your stomach, so to speak. Maybe your breath begins to become more shallow and more rapid. Maybe you begin to perspire more, but that's your body signal like, wow, pause, you need to re-regulate and move from that thinking process back into that heart-centered process as well, in order to really align with what's important and how you're integrating with your entire system.
Yeah. I know I get dry mouth and I get a little shaky. Like that's how it goes up for me. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get the same, depending on what the situation may be.
We're all human, right?
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And we are all human, and that's an important aspect to remember as well, is that sometimes we can't address situations and problems from a non-human perspective and lose sight of that. And so when we can remain aligned with that particular piece, take that pause, come back to that alignment and what's important, and where does it fall from our value set? How my emotions, are they really heart-centered, or are they just thoughts that are transpiring right now? And how do I re-regulate my system in order to be able to respond appropriately?
Yeah.
Hey, good morning. Here's the message for the day. Let's find and focus on the positive today, because that's truly what's going to propel us forward. So, simple message, simple action.
Wow. All helpful tools for sure. Well, I'd love to just shift gears really quick and touch on the breast cancer piece, because it's, breast cancer is a part of our experience, and it's more often talked about, especially in women versus in men. And yet, it shows up in men. And then in your family, there were 4 of you that had this same type of cancer. And I don't know if it was occurring all at the same time. I mean, what was that like for you, and how you supported each other, or what you were dealing with in that way? I mean,
we're all diagnosed at the same time. So my mother was initially diagnosed back in the late 80s, early 90s, and then unfortunately lost her in 96 to breast cancer. And then I'm the oldest of six. So my siblings, I've got 3 brothers and 2 sisters. So the oldest sister, who's several years younger than me, had an occurrence at about the same age as my mom did. And so that was in 2005, I believe, 2004. And so she went through surgery and through chemotherapy, and was doing fairly well. Then my other sister, right around the same time, a couple of years later, got a diagnosis as well. She went through the same. And so they've been battling for a number of years. And then I was diagnosed in 2021. Pretty surprised, because when you think of breast cancer, you don't normally think of men, and men don't normally associate themselves with breast cancer from a disease perspective. And so I was pretty shocked around it, to be quite honest, initially. And thank goodness, I had some great care providers and great support around me to help me navigate that process.
Absolutely. Have you heard about the book, Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton?
I have not heard of that one, but now I'm gonna have to look it up and probably get it.
So he published that in 2005, and I think it was monumental for me, not only in terms of becoming a coach, because that was the first time I started to dip my toe in that water. But also in my family, we've had cancer, we've had strokes, heart disease. And it's a fascinating book, and he's a cellular biologist. So yeah, so I would highly recommend getting that, because I'm curious how you would respond to it. But so all of these experiences, Rob, have, the topic of resilience has come up a lot over the past few years, especially in our coaching world. And I think it's taken on a whole new meaning. And I don't want to say it was like a trend for a while, and now the terminology is changing. But in regards to, resilience, what are like maybe just a few layers of that have been helpful to you or have come to light for you, especially over the past few years?
So I think real resilience is about our ability to stay grounded while everything around you is actually pulling you for a reaction. So whether that be an emotional reaction, whether that be a mental reaction, whether that be a physical reaction, it's how do I stay grounded and really in alignment with who I am and what I'm here for and what I'm supposed to be doing, and understanding that at times we're going to get pulled off. We're going to get pulled off our path. So how do I get back on my path? How do I get back on my path faster? How do I avoid some of the negatives that could occur in my life being pulled off that path? And so it's about getting back in alignment. Resilience is really about staying in alignment with the direction that you're supposed to be headed.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You've probably seen this too. I love that the conversation about purpose and aligning to your path has become a little bit more mainstream and common versus how it used to be.
Right.
I don't think well, first of all, we didn't really talk about that little on resilience, but the significance of it.
The important part is not how I get there. The important part is getting there. And so when one path gets shut down, then all of a sudden we need to look to where does the other path open up at, and what does that mean around our particular journey? And so the purpose, looking towards the purpose and saying, okay, this is where I need to go, then, and staying focused on that, then everything else can open up and our perspective can begin to shift.
I love that. One of my common sayings that I share with people is everyone's on their own path, going at their own pace. To remind you that, look, this is not about keeping up with the Joneses. This is not about doing it the way everybody else does it. I mean, I have to remind myself of that too all the time. And so that I don't try to force myself into somebody else's box.
Right.
It works out well for me when I try to do that.
Yeah, I mean, remaining authentic to who you are and where your purpose is at is so key. Being authentic is being grounded really in your values, and not using character to drive your values, but using values to drive your character.
I love that. Say that one more time.
Yeah, don't use character to drive your values. Let values drive your character.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important because it's easy to get off track.
Over this past year, I've been a geek about frequency. Frequency.
I love that.
And I've learned that actually, I think I thought this too, I thought that the highest frequency you could be at is in the frequency of love. And it's not. The frequency of authenticity is actually higher than the frequency of love.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm going to push it one level higher from my perspective is like the frequency of gratitude. Because when you can move into gratitude, then it becomes easier to be authentic. It becomes easier to love because we can always be grateful for something. There's always something to be grateful for. And if you can't find something to be grateful for, then really that fault lies within ourselves, nobody else.
Well, on that note, in this moment, right now, what are you most grateful for?
I'm actually grateful. I'm grateful to be here in this conversation with you, Alanna, because this is so great. I get to find out a little bit more about you, about what you're doing, and how you're remaining authentic in the world, and to participate in something as important to you as a podcast has great meaning to me. So thank you for that. I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, really quick too, you mentioned something about humor in your bio. So
Okay. Yeah.
what does that mean for you? And like, what are some, what's a quick tip way that we could experience more of that in our life?
I think we just need to look for it. I mean, there's so much humor that's out there and available to us. And sometimes I can be couched as like, oh, you're really serious, Rob. And so I constantly have to be looking for, okay, where can I lighten it up a bit? Where can I find the humor in it? Because even in some of the most challenging times, there's still humor associated with it. But you have to look for it. You have to search it out. It just doesn't, it doesn't naturally sometimes it just shows up, but if you're not looking for it, you're not paying attention, you'll miss it.
Yeah. Let's create that levity where we can, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the last question I have for you is around your business name, Ronin Awaken. And I remember looking at that, thinking to myself, what does that really mean? And you wrote me back and you said, it's about self-mastery. So just say more about that and then point quickly to the work that you're doing and how that shows up for you.
Yeah, so Ronin Awakens. So if you know the story of the Ronin and from the Japanese perspective, it's really interesting. But it's a story about Japanese samurai, and so Ronin Awaken is about awakening your own internal samurai. It's about awakening that which already exists inside of you. So I believe that we all have what we need in life to be able to move forward already exists inside of us. And so my responsibility, because I work with individuals from a coaching perspective, as you well know, is to help you to realize that and to help you pull that out and for you to awaken that inner samurai that's inside of yourself in order to be able to move forward.
Yeah. It's realizing that we also have our own answers, but sometimes we're blocked or we can't get to it, or we get in our own way, or experiences sometimes cloud that. Yeah.
100%, Alanna, 100%. So that name really sang to me, obviously from a number of different levels, my military background to be included. And so, I'm a psychological performance coach, and I work with, organizations and individuals to help them advance and become, get through adversity, advance from a resilience perspective, be able to make big mindset shifts. So for me, being able to help individuals do that and organizations do that is part of my purpose and part of my path in life. And so that's how it's all tied together.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Rob, to wrap up, any last, bits of wisdom that you want to leave our audience with before we say goodbye?
Well, thanks for that, Alanna. I think the best piece I could probably throw out is to individuals is to find that authenticity and remain authentic in your life and what's important to you, and move to that which is important to you, which ultimately is your purpose.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Alanna, thank you for having me as a guest. I really appreciate you, and I'm very grateful for that today. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right.
If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because big breakthroughs start with bold conversations. And if you're done playing it safe, tired of waiting, or trying to figure it all out alone, let's talk. Alanna Levenson works with leaders and entrepreneurs who are ready to break through and go all in. You can connect with Alanna on her YouTube channel or find her on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you got value from this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and drop a comment. We'd love to hear what resonated with you. Until next time, keep pushing, keep trusting yourself, and keep defying limits. See you soon.